Hi friends, my name is Emily. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my nonfiction TBR pile. So I like to learn things, and I also have a little bit of a book buying issue in which when I see a really good deal, because I am a bookseller, I work at a bookstore, I get an employee discount, and sometimes if those books are already price pointed, I get a little additional discount with my employee discount, and sometimes it's too good to resist if it's something I really want to read. And so I've amassed a little nonfiction TBR pile. Not as bad as my whole TBR pile, but still kind of bad. And so I want to share this with you guys today, both to get myself talking about why I purchased these books in the first place, and hopefully inspire myself to pick these up sooner, but also to hear from you guys. Have you read these? Did you enjoy these? What do you think? Let's get talking. Let's get excited about these things. Let's get into the books. So the first book I have here is the last of the three that I picked up because it was recommended that I check out some books on mindfulness and meditation to help with my mental health, and that is 10% Happier by Dan Harris. This is How I Tamed the Voice in My Head, Reduced Stress Without Losing My Edge, and Found Self-Help That Actually Works. A true story. I am hoping that this is significantly less bullshitty than the other two. And I mean bullshitty in the most loving and respectful way. Apparently what I am looking for in a self-help book is not to adopt a new religion, not to convert, but to find something that's balanced between a holistic approach to health and science. The next book I have here, I have been looking at for a while now because it is a Heather's pick, and every time I do the Trade Weekly story and I move it to that top shelf, I stock this. It has been sitting on the top shelf of our nonfiction bestsellers. It's a Heather's pick. It's been there for a while, and so I picked it up. So this is a biography. It's about Tara Westover. She was 17, the first time she ever set foot in a traditional classroom. It's basically about her having no formal education and teaching herself to the point where she's able to go to university. I just think it sounds like a really interesting life experience. I am interested in education, so I think it will be really neat. The next book I have here I picked up during my master's. It came up in my research and I ordered a secondhand copy, and I've never got to it. And it is The Tough Guide to Fantasyland by Diana Wynne Jones. It is a bit of a parody. It is a humorous guide to fantasy that picks fun and pokes at all of the tropes and genre conventions, and I think it will just be really fun to look at a genre that I love so much from the perspective of a fantasy writer, because she's the one critiquing these tropes in her humorous little guide, and I think it will be really good. The next book I have here I picked up from work. This was sent by the publishers for free for an Indigo employee to pick up and enjoy and to hopefully hand sell. And so the publisher sent this to us. The publisher, the human fellow book lover, Kevin, who really stands behind this book. He really likes this book, and that is Mad Blood Stirring: The Inner Lives of Violent Men by Damon Fairless. So it is a timely, gripping, and intensely personal look at violent men, from street fighters to soldiers to mixed martial artists to rapists to murderers, reported with a rare clarity and fearless honesty by a man who has struggled with his own violent impulses. So I think definitely in light of the Me Too movement, it is important to think about masculinity and the ways in which our sexist culture shapes the lives of not only women, but of men. I think this will be really interesting, and I really want to get to this year because it is very timely. The next book I have here, I have no idea why I picked it up, but it is Gossip from the Forest: The Tangled Roots of Forest and Fairy Tales by Sarah Maitland. Now I remember this I picked up after reading Uprooted and The Bear and the Nightingale and having this sort of re-emerging interest in learning about fairy tales. It looks like this is going to be looking at the forest as this recurring motif in fairy tales, which is something that we see in both Uprooted and The Bear and the Nightingale. Very excited to read this actually because I just forgot how cool this sounds. The next book I have here is Beyond the Pale: Folklore, Family, and the Mystery of Our Hidden Genes by Emily Urquhart. This I picked up because Jan Campbell is interested in fairy tales and talks about fairy tales, and this specifically looks at the folklore and fairy tales around albinism. I think this also might be especially interesting to read and then reread Akata Witch, where the main character is an albino Nigerian girl. The next book I have here I do really want to get to this year as well, and that is Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. So I think coming out of the Black Lives Matter movement, it is important to listen to other people's voices, people who have lived experience that I will never have. If you want to be a good ally, you need to educate yourself and you need to listen to the voices of others. So this is about Edo-Lodge's frustration with the way that discussions of race and racism in Britain were being led by those who weren't affected by it. It's a new framework for how to see, acknowledge, and counter racism today. So while this is more focused on racism in Britain, I think that many of the same things will apply to life in Canada, which is a British colony, a former British colony. The next book I have here I picked up for my Sex and YA series, and that is For Goodness Sex, Changing the Way We Talk to Teens About Sexuality, Values, and Health by Al Verracchio. This is a parenting book. This sounds like the worst way to talk to kids about sex because you're making a dad pun in the title. Because I'm interested in thinking about what we teach kids about sex, thinking about sex in YA literature, I think it's important to think about what advice is being given to parents. I'm not a parent. I am nowhere near the age of being a parent to a teen. Actually, is that physically possible? Oh yeah, I guess it's physically possible that I could have a teen. But I don't. The point is that I don't. Not the point at all. Because I'm not a parent, I'm interested in parents' perspectives because I'm definitely closer to the age of a teen than I am closer to the age of the average age for a parent of a teen. I just wanted a different perspective to consider for my Sex and YA series. The next book I have here is The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, How to Free Yourself and Your Family from a Lifetime of Clutter by Margrethe Magnusson. I have a lot of things, if you can't tell. I think the KonMari method was fantastic for my closet. I don't think the KonMari method works with my bookshelf, and so I'm looking at other cleaning and organizing methods. My dog would like to come downstairs, but he's not allowed downstairs, so if you can hear that on mic, I'm sorry. So the next book I have here is The Cambridge Companion to Fantasy Literature, edited by Edward James and Farah Mendelssohn. So this is left over from my master's thesis project. I ran out of time to read it. There's a certain point in any project where you have to sort of stop researching new things because you have to actually write the thing. So, but my interest in fantasy literature has obviously not gone away. So I do want to read this. I'm hoping one day soon to convert my master's thesis to a video series, and reading this alongside this for that series, sort of incorporating anything that might be relevant, I think is still good. Along the same lines, I have Indistinguishable from Magic by Catherine M. Valenti. So this is more than 60 essays by Catherine M. Valenti, her observations about fairy tales, myths, pop culture, gender, race issues. It's always interesting when authors get meta about their genre, about their craft. This is going to be interesting because Valenti does write fantasy. It will be interesting to see her opinions on fantasy literature. The next book I have here is something that I really wanted to read while I was in school, but I couldn't find a copy of. So we had an opportunity to do a final project on one of several different books for a masculinity studies course that I took. And one of the books was Do Girafeg, Masculinity and Sexuality in High School by C.J. Pascoe. Now I couldn't find a copy then, but later I was actually at the Salvation Army bookstore by my university campus, and I found a copy of this book. So I picked this up because I always wanted to read it for the class, but I couldn't find a copy. The next book I have here is The ABCs of LGBT by Ash Mardell. So this is a guide to like all of the terms that you might need, and I want this really for my Sex and YA series because I want succinct, youth-friendly, internet-friendly definition for any sort of term that I want to bring up in the Sex and Way series. And I think this will be really helpful to have. That is the audience that Ash has designed this for. A young, not necessarily academic audience. The next book I have here is The Book of Penis by Maggie Paley. So this is a little bit old now. I think I've had this for 5 or 6 years. This is really old now. It was published in 1999. We'll see how applicable this still is. Thankfully, a lot of science does go towards men. Historically, a lot of science has been done on men. We know a lot more about men's reproductive health and how their bodies function than we really do about women's reproductive health. The next book I have here I sampled from for my master's thesis, and I think this will be really fascinating to think about alongside the Sex and YA series, and that is Harmful to Minors by Judith Levine. So this is a provocative devil's advocate sort of argument looking at young people and desire. Because we have laws in place to protect young people sexually, this is sort of controversial. But devil's advocate, Levine looks at the agency of young people. I guess the argument is that adults are taking away the agency of young people. Young people should have agency over their bodies. They know what they want. They know what they like. It's adults who decide the age of consent. It's adults who decide when it is appropriate for young people to have sexual desire, when it's appropriate for young people to act on those sexual desires. It's always adults telling young people what they can and cannot do with their bodies. And so devil's advocate argument is looking at how that removes agency from young people. Not that I want to question consent laws, because I think that they are very important. I think that young people are vulnerable, but I also think it's interesting to think about and important to think about agency and choice. The last book I have here is again left over from my master's thesis, and I did sample one of the essays from it, but I didn't read the rest of them. And I didn't read the rest of them in full. I sort of skimmed them looking to see if they were useful, but I want to like sit down and like fully engage with Texts of Desire, Essays on Fiction, Femininity, and Schooling, edited by Linda K. Christian Smith. This is critical perspectives on literacy and education. It's looking at young people, desire, fiction, all of these things that I sort of want to think through with my Sex and YA series. So again, I think this will be super useful. It was useful for my master's thesis to begin with in terms of fantasy literature, believe it or not. That is my nonfiction TBR pile. Talking about some of these has me very, very excited to pick them up way sooner than I probably would have just looking at the stack. Like there were things on this stack that I looked at that I was like, yeah, I really want to read that. But talking about these books to you guys has me really excited to pick up some of these things like way sooner. Thank you guys for listening. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If there's anything that you really want to see me read soon, if there's anything that you've read here and you have thoughts on, I would love to chat with you. If you liked what you saw today, be sure to give this video a like and consider subscribing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.